bbclearningenglish.com presents Talk About English, a series of radio features that support your English language studies.
Hello. In recent programmes in this series, Who on Earth Are We?, Mark Beebe's looked at some of the more obvious ways that cultures can be different from one another. The different ways we use language or non-verbal communication, for example. Now, here's Mark to tell us about some other differences.
Today, we're going to be hearing about two less obvious, but still very important ways that cultures can vary. Our different attitudes to time and to space. We begin in Brazil with Ana Baltazar.
In the case of the Brazilian Indians, I believe the question of time and space is completely related. They build their houses in a very particular way, completely related to time, to the position of the sun and things like that. And this thing of time is not like our time today, like every minute really matters. But for them it's like longer time, but they are completely aware of it and they are kind of really using time, but in a more patient way, I believe.
As Ana Baltazar says, for Brazilian Indians, time and space are closely related. In fact, although we may not be aware of it, time and space are closely related concepts for all of us. We'll be looking at this idea in more detail later in the programme. But first things first. Here's Rebecca Fong, a teacher of intercultural communication at the University of the West of England, Dr. Rajni Badlani from India, and Ailey Hamilton, who spent several years in the Middle East, talking about time and how we like to organise it.
The way we package the notion of time is important. In order to describe it and manage it, we divide it up into manageable periods, so there are days and years and seasons and weeks and so on. But we also divide it up into periods of time that are cultural, so we can have periods between festivals, or the periods of festivals such as Ramadan or Easter or Hanukkah. We also divide it into individual times, so we have the periods between birthdays or when our first children or our second children are born. Time also has depth, by which I mean history, so that countries like America or Australia are modern or young in terms of history, whereas cultures such as China and Arab cultures have histories that last for thousands of years. So time has meaning to us as individuals, but it also has meaning to us as cultures.
We have this phrase called Indian Standard Time, which is a joke, which is like always being either half an hour late or 1 hour late. But increasingly now, with the globalization and with having to deal with people from outside India, lots of people are becoming aware that they need to keep appointments and seeing the value of time.
I think people do have an image of Arabs as being very late, which is not necessarily fair. What people do there is they tend to allow a much greater period of time for each social engagement. So perhaps if you were invited for lunch at 2, you would expect to remain with your friends, your hosts, until the evening. Whereas perhaps in Europe, you might go at 2 and have left by 4:30. Because of that, perhaps, people aren't necessarily as punctual as we would expect them to be, because there's a much greater leeway in terms of the time.
Ailey Hamilton. The first person to identify time and space as important elements in the study of culture was the North American anthropologist Edward T. Hall. In looking at cultural attitudes to time, Hall made an important distinction between cultures where people like to do one thing at a time, monochronic cultures, and polychronic cultures, where people have no problem doing several things at once. Now, of course, it's not quite as simple as that. Professor James Keegan, a teacher of international communication at Bethany College in North America, and Dr. David Banks from Canada help Rebecca Fong give a more detailed guide to the general characteristics of monochronic and polychronic cultures.
Monochronism tends to go with cultures where people value individuality, personal space and personal time. And it's a characteristic of these peoples that they like to compartmentalise time. They put it on calendars, they make appointments, they do one thing at a time. They always have something to do in a sort of linear route forwards. North Americans count as people like this. They want to do something, get it over and done with, more or less on time, and then move on to the next activity.
We're a society that likes to save time. So time is of an essence, there's no doubt about it. From a non-North American perspective, we can seem very abrupt. We can seem as though we're in a hurry. We're a can-do society. I'm always in awe of the fact that people around me, village people and so on, can actually get things done and get organised and move ahead very quickly. And then at other times I'm absolutely frustrated because we've gone ahead and done something that we haven't thought enough about.
Time is linear, and time is moving forwards, and time is money. So for both North Americans and British people, and other people from monochronic cultures, time is equated with doing something, being active, but usually doing one thing at a time. And one of the byproducts of this is that we think that doing nothing is wasting time. Polychronic cultures have an attitude to time that's different to this. They don't structure their time in the same way. They're much more able to be doing several things at once. So in cultures which tend to be more polychronic, such as Arab, Turk, Spanish, Indian cultures, people can be talking to more than one person at a time. They can be interacting with more than one person at a time. They can be living with several people at a time as well. To people from monochronic cultures, this can seem like a very chaotic way of living.
My parents took the view that when a child turns 18, they should move on out of the house and move on towards university or profession or whatever it is they're doing. Now, in my case, it's a bit unusual because I'm married to an Asian woman who's quite traditional. And we moved in with her family. That's normal procedure. So it was the typical kind of Asian household, lots of vocal action and people running back and forth. It was a very dynamic household. But when my children are, say, running around the house with friends, for example, making a lot of noise, I still find that very hard to take. My wife, on the other hand, is quite comfortable with the idea of having a lot of kids running around, playing and making noise, and with a more chaotic kind of living environment. And I still struggle with that one.
David Banks.
bbclearningenglish.com.
As we've heard, the way we think about time is a reflection of our ideas about order and organisation. Do we like to do one thing at a time, or are we happy to do several things at once? Exactly the same sort of considerations and differences can be seen in the way cultures like to organise space. Take public spaces, for example. In Arab cultures, a public space is a place where people can come together, often in very large numbers, to talk, do business, socialise. These are often very busy, active places with lots of things going on at once. This isn't really the same in, say, modern British or American towns, which are often built around a long, thin main street where people can't gather in groups in quite the same way. The differences in the design and use of these public spaces are cultural differences, and we can see these differences even more clearly in the way we design and use the spaces in our houses. Rebecca Fong explains, with illustrations from Dion Charmaine from Jamaica, Munia El Kouch from Morocco, Ailey Hamilton and Kyung-Ja Yu from Japan.
Even the organisation of our cities and our villages and our housing can be a reflection of our cultural requirements for space. British culture, for example, separates rooms into different functions so that you have the kitchen for cooking in, the dining room for eating in, the bedroom for sleeping in. And we're very protective of our individual spaces, so we love to have our own bedrooms and we have our own chairs and we have our own secret drawers. This is very different in other cultures.
The house had massive back
yard and front garden space, which is standard to Jamaican houses. You know, they have loads of space. We played a lot outside, more outside than inside. It was almost as if the whole neighborhood was your house or your home, so to speak. We had a big family and, you know, always into each other's spaces. It was never private.
An average Moroccan home varies from place to place. In the countryside, made of stone usually, and very often there will be a courtyard in the middle, an open roof, perhaps a fountain, and very traditional mosaic designs around the walls, even the floors, and perhaps the ceilings too.
Arabs don't have much space in public, but they love to have big spaces inside their houses. They idealise large, empty rooms with not much furniture because they don't like to be alone. They like to be with each other inside these big spaces.
Personal space is such an issue for Westerners, and I think there are two main aspects of that. One is simply the physical space when you're talking to someone, but another aspect of it, which I think we value very highly, is our privacy and our right to privacy. In the Middle East, that is just not a value that people hold. Interestingly, within Arabic, they use the same word for lonely and alone, therefore meaning that if you've chosen to be in a solitary state, there is a problem with this. You must be unhappy. When I lived with Syrian families, this would often be an issue because I might retire to my room to read and they would be worried about me, so they'd come and want me to come and drink tea with them, which is very caring, but it's a reflection of their hatred of being alone.
The Japanese, on the other hand, don't have much physical space. They have very small apartments and houses. But what they do with the space is very clever. The spaces are multifunctional. So during the day, they'll have a sitting room, where at night they'll remove all the furniture and it becomes a bedroom.
The typical Japanese house is basically one big room. Could be dining area, living area, the place to entertain guests, and then could be guest room or even your bedroom. The generation before me hardly really had their own room when they are a child. They share the room. They always stay with their parents. Parents know everything.
Kyung-ja Yu. Broadly speaking, monochronic cultures, where people like to do one thing at a time, also seem to be those that value privacy and individual space. Whereas cultures that are happy to do several things at once, polychronic cultures, seem to favour spaces where people can come together in groups. This leads us to one of the most important ways of describing the differences between cultures. The differences between cultures where the individual is seen as central and those where the group, or the collective, is seen as the most important unit.
That was Mark Beebe ending this Talk About English edition of Who on Earth Are We? We'll be hearing more about individual and collective cultures in our next two programmes. I hope you'll join us.
That was Talk About English from bbclearningenglish.com.